Hey, and welcome to Class Winners Collector Vehicles Ranked. I'm Sam Bearer, car guy in chief and former collector car journalist. And this is where I tell you from experience which is the best. And today it's a throwdown of Japanese Kei supercars. The ABC Kei supercars, to be exact. That's the AutoZam AZ-1 and Suzuki Kara Twin. It's the Honda Beat, and it's the Suzuki Cappuccino. Which one is the best? Well, I've driven them all, and I'm gonna tell you. Stick around. For 1990, Japan upped its engine displacement maximum from 550 cc's to 660 cc's in the Kei car class. And that meant that the auto manufacturers could give a little more oomph to the engines. And that was all they needed to give us some really great sports cars. Now, all of these cars have the same engine displacement within a few cc's. They're all the same length at 10 feet, 10 inches long, about the same weight and about the same width and around the same height. But they couldn't be more different in terms of performance, handling, looks. So which one is the best? Well, let's get right down to it and start off with Honda Beat, because they were the first ones out of the gate. They actually bought the rights to a Pininfarina design concept. So an Italian coachmaker looking for someone to put something into production with their brain power and their craftsmanship. Well, it turned out Honda just bought it, re-engineered it, and they were the first out of the gate in 1991. Now, it's a beautiful, very Italian looking two-seat roadster with the engine midships and naturally aspirated. Very cool car, and this is what we said about it. They really hit the mark with the midship amusement tagline. Because yes, it is midship, and yes, it is very amusing to drive. It's not a fire-breathing sports car by any stretch. But if you can't have fun in this car, you don't have a heartbeat. Next out of the gate was Suzuki with its Cappuccino, using the F6A engine, but with a turbo and an intercooler. It was a very potent unit. Now, Suzuki decided to go for a more traditional front engine design. Now, what was not traditional about it was the 4-position hardtop.
Latch, reach in your center console, hit a little button and let that go, and boom.
Now, this is what we said about it when we reviewed it. They couldn't have named this car any better, because this thing is as addictive as a tall cup of cappuccino. Well, it gives you that feeling of just being jittery and alive. It's actually more like having a cup of cappuccino, well, dumped in your lap. It just makes you move. It makes you jump. This thing is alive. Last out of the gate was the AutoZam AZ-1. Now, interestingly, just like the Cappuccino, it was actually made by Suzuki. And Suzuki produced a twin car in limited numbers called the Suzuki Kara. The AutoZam AZ-1 looked totally different from all the rest because it was a mid-engine car, but had gull wings, and it was made of composite materials on a backbone metal chassis. Looked like it was from outer space. And this is what I said about it when I first reviewed it. But the AZ-1 has that X factor. First of all, you roll up in this car, and even before you put the gull wing doors, people are oohing and eyeing.
Then you put up the gull-wing doors and people fall out of their seats. But as we know from other cars with funky doors, if it can't deliver when you're inside, all that design is for naught. And in this case, oh boy, not only does it delivers in a way that is so much fun.
So let the ranking process begin. And we're going to start with where everybody wants to start: performance, and specifically engine performance. In third place, the Honda Beat. Now, the only reason the Honda is in third place is because, being first out of the gate, they took the K horsepower limit to mean engine horsepower. So at 63 point something horsepower, it's naturally aspirated, high revving, 660cc dual overhead cam with individual throttle butterflies for each cylinder. It's very responsive, and this is what it felt like at the time.
There's not a lot of torque down low, but that's 8,500 RPMs. So once you get up into the power band, wow, it really goes. And once you hear that exhaust note, you're gonna forget about all that lack of low end torque. That's just cool.
Now here's the interesting thing. Both the Suzuki Kera and AutoZam AZ-1 and the Suzuki Cappuccino, they use the same engine. So really they should tie for first place. But they don't, for one very tiny reason. In the front engine configuration, it's better breathing. In the mid-engine configuration, the exhaust pipe makes a 180-degree bend almost. So it's less restrictive in the Cappuccino, so it gives a little bit more performance. But here's what 0 to 60 looks like.
All right, here we go, 0 to 60 test.
Reason to put the Suzuki Cappuccino in first place in the engine performance category is that in late calendar year 1994, the F6A engine was replaced with a new all-aluminum K6A engine with slightly more mid-range torque.
This one's all aluminum, and it doesn't have a timing belt, it has a timing chain. And that means this thing is a lot lighter. This thing has 74 foot-pounds of torque instead of 63 in the F6A first generation capo. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, 11 foot-pounds, but that's 17.5% more torque. And you can actually feel it. Power. Yeah, right when you come up on 3,000, it starts pulling so much harder, and it's awesome. Now, 0 to 60 time, still not setting the world on fire, but man, it feels fast, and it is certainly fun, and it revs all the way up to 9 grand. Well, actually, it'll rev all the way to 10 grand if you're heavy in the foot, and it doesn't complain at all.
And when it comes to top speed, it's pretty much the same story. Slowest, at 85 miles an hour, flat out, is the Honda Beat. You see, it's geared so that you hit your top maximum K-regulated speed at red line in 5th gear. So running in a 70 or 75 mile an hour zone, it's a high RPM affair. Now, that brings us to the AutoZam AZ-1, what is slightly shorter gear ratios and final drive. That puts us at a regulated 85 miles an hour top, but pulling the speed sensor will allow you to go all the way up to about 105, 107 miles an hour. Finally, the Suzuki Cappuccino. Now, cars that I've actually owned and driven with their new owners, they pulled the speed sensors and have seen 114 miles an hour on GPS. It'll actually pull above red line in fifth gear. And let's just say that we haven't found anybody who's really gone up to that fuel cutoff at 10,000 RPMs in fifth gear. When it comes to transmission, there's no need to rank in this aspect because all three cars have good, tight, fun to shift systems.
This thing's fun to shift. Throws are, well, Vern Troyer mini-me short.
Let's just move on to more important things. It's time for handling. And again, in third place is the Honda Beat. And this is what I said about the Beat when I first reviewed it.
Handling on this thing is incredible. And it allows you to make the most out of this engine behind us. We got McPherson struts all around. And great weight balance.
The Beat's Achilles heel is that it has a little bit too much chassis flex. Now, one of the great things you can do with a Honda Beat, and most owners have already done this, is install a strut tower brace in front. And that absolutely transforms the handling of the Honda Beat and puts it more on par with the AZ-1 and the Cappuccino. We have a different result than we did in the performance, because in handling, it's a tie between the Suzuki Cappuccino and the AutoZam AZ-1, because both of them are an absolute riot to put through the twisties. Now, each of them does something a little bit better than the other, but at the end, they're both extremely capable sports cars that can actually outdrive, outhandle a lot of big name high performance sports cars. And this is what it was like to handle and saw at the wheel at both of them.
And I tell you, this thing just goes around corners like it's on rails. But you need to get it right. Remember, this is 56% rear weight balance and 44 up front. So if you're uninitiated and you lift off the throttle, it'll come around on you. But that being said, if you know what you're doing, this 2.2 turns lock to lock steering, oh my God, it's a little darty at speed, but when you're doing this, it's perfect. This road is like perfect for this car, and this car is just absolutely perfect for this road. I can't think of anything I'd rather be driving for that mid-speed country road. But you see a yellow sign that tells you to slow down and you just want to plant your foot in and keep going. It's awesome. Handling is courtesy of four-wheel independent suspension, the type found on many expensive cars. It's rear-wheel drive so you can drift it. Great four-wheel disc brakes. There's 50-50 weight distribution, but Suzuki said it only achieved that with two people in the car. But considering I weigh about just twice as much as the standard Japanese adult, it's 50-50 right now.
Now it comes down to ergonomics. Now this is a really important one because if you can't fit in it to drive it, or it hurts your backs or your legs or your shoulders or whatever. It doesn't matter how great a car it is if you can't experience it. So in third place, oh, by far, the AutoZam AZ-1. Because what a disaster on the inside for human comfort.
Let's talk about ergonomics in depth a little bit more. Because although I love to joke about it, it's really not that bad. So first and foremost, this is as far back as the seat goes. And it will come forward about 4 or 5 inches and put you closer to the steering wheel, but you don't need that. There is no back rake adjustment. This is a fixed bucket. Passenger side, well, that's bolted right to the floor. So what you see is what you get. If it weren't for this aftermarket Sparco steering wheel, we'd be in a world of hurt, because the original AutoZam OEM one is about this big, and that would mean my knee would be over here, over the gear shift. As fun as this is, you'd never want to make one of these things your daily driver. In terms of overall practicality, it ranks pretty low. I mean, not like Lamborghini Countach low, but let's put it this way. There's some room behind the seats for some stuff. There's a little bit of room in the front, but not much. I mean, we're talking about maybe an overnight bag. But day to day, getting in and out of this thing multiple times, that would get pretty old.
In second place, it's the Honda Beat, because they take a cool interior, and maybe there's just not quite enough knee room or headroom, but it's still pretty comfortable.
Anyone who has ever owned any mid-engine car will tell you that there's obvious downsides. Well, there's not a lot of interior space, and since there's no tilt steering wheel, if you're 6'4" like I am, well, it's hard to turn because your knees get in the way. There's not a lot of storage space in the car at all. I mean, there's probably room in here somewhere for a CD or a cassette tape and a map, and there's basically room for a Happy Meal and a bag of chips in the trunk, but that's a trade-off you get.
Again, in first place is the Suzuki Cappuccino. What it lacks in shoulder room, it makes up for in head and in leg room.
You know, the Cappuccino's, it's not perfect either. It's pretty narrow. You know, there's not a lot of place for you to put your elbow and shoulder. The trunk is really small, and when you put the tops in it, there is basically room for a couple Ziploc bags. But it gets great gas mileage, it's super fun, and it's comfortable. So, yeah, the pros way outstrip the cons.
Now it comes down to just styling. And I admit, this is a purely subjective exercise. But we'll call it the look at me factor. So when you actually bring one of these cars to a show, especially if other ones are around, how does it pull? Now, in third place is the Suzuki Cappuccino. Now keep in mind, it's 4-position top, it's a great party trick, and it's a good looking vehicle. But it basically looks like a miniature Miata. So it's less likely to turn heads. It's handsome, it's great, but it doesn't look otherworldly. In second place, well, it's got to be the Honda Beat. It is a beautiful but slightly exotic looking two-seat roadster. It's mid-engine, it tends to have bright colors, and come on, those zebra patterned seats and the floating gauge pod, well, that screams look at me. In first place, you knew it was coming, the AZ-1. There's nothing in the US market that looks like an AutoZam AZ-1 or Suzuki Kara. So you put those gull wing doors up, people are gonna flock. Even when they're down, its angular proportions, everything about it, it just looks like something that's cool. Now let's talk about reliability, service, maintenance, parts. And in third place, it's the Honda Beat. Now, anybody who has ever had to do a timing belt on a mid-engine car knows that it can be a pain in the butt. And unlike the AZ-1, the Honda Beat has almost no accessibility. So anytime you're working on the top end of the engine or any of those ancillaries, it's just a pain to get to. And God help you with what we've called the bitch bolt when doing a timing belt, because there's one bolt that can take you several hours to get back in because there's just no room to maneuver it to get the thread started. Now, in second place, it's the AZ-1 because it's also mid-engine, but there's far better engine access, both from the rear and from a service plate from behind the seats. But parts are not as available as they are for the other two. Things that should be available, like the gull wing struts that keep the doors open, well, they're basically made of unobtainium. So depending on the part, it may not be available or it may be available, but it's going to cost you a lot more. Now, in first place, it's the Suzuki Cappuccino. Engine access is good, parts are mostly available, and although Suzuki was kind of cheaper in its way that it made its vehicles, it's overall a pretty good and pretty reliable vehicle. So this brings us to the final category, which is how likely it is for you to find a really good one. Now, in third place, you have the AutoZam AZ-1 and Suzuki Kara. From 1992 through 1994, they only made 4,392 AZ-1s and only 531 Suzuki Karas. Most of them were driven hard and then driven harder by the second owners and then modified. Your chances of finding one for sale, well, it's pretty high. The chances of it being stock, unmodified, unmolested, pretty much nil. And is it going to be in good condition with good paint and unrusted frame and good interior? Really unlikely. And what are you going to pay for it? A lot. A really nice AZ-1, you're now looking about 30 grand. In second place, it's the Suzuki Cappuccino. Now, the Suzuki Cappuccino had the longest production run from November of 1991 through late 97 with cars selling into 1998. And there are about 28,000 made. Cappuccinos tend to rust badly. The interiors, well, they're not particularly hard wearing. And owners tended to drive them hard, modify them a lot, not do the service. So while there are always cappuccinos on the market, you can go for quite a long time without seeing a really good one for sale. And that doubles down on the last K6A powered EA21R cappuccinos, the most desirables. Now, you can find them with the automatic transmissions in that second generation, but a 5-speed, well, that's looking for a needle in a haystack within a needle in a haystack. In first place are Honda Beats. Now, they weren't great hard-wearing cars, so a lot of them were modified and wrecked and repainted, but there were a gaggle of them made. In fact, about 33,600 units between May of 1991 through the end of production in February 1996. There are always a ton of Beats out there, including some with the hard top option in place of the soft top. But you need to buy wisely because they rusted, the paint often faded out, and people didn't always do the timing belt service. So it's likely that most of the cars out there that you're looking at, even though they might look good, are hiding some secrets. But spend some time looking and you can find a really good one, and even some low mileage ones. So in the final rankings, how do they stack up? Well, in third place, it's the Honda Beat. Look, it's a great sports car, kind of in the vein of the classic British and Italian cars. It looks great. It stands out. It gives you great seat of the pants experience. It revs to the moon. It puts a smile on your face. But it's not that practical, and it's simply outgunned by the turbocharged and intercooled competition from Suzuki and AutoZam. But if you like the looks and you fit and you want a car with soft top ease, well, this is your choice. And I'd happily own one. I love driving them. And the Honda Beat, because it's more available, because it's not quite as high performing as the other two, you can get one for far cheaper. In fact, it's about half the price of a Cappuccino and almost a third of the price of an AZ-1. In second place, and I'm going to get a lot of boos for this, but really, this is how it stands with all the rankings. AutoZam AZ-1. Now, it is a cool car, and it is so fun to drive. It's a little pocket rocket. And despite what people have said about high-speed instability, it's just not true. Buy a good one, and they are a riot. Flat out, on an autocross, on a B road, it's just great. But where it lacks is simply that it's a torture chamber in there. You can't drive it for long because there's just not enough space unless you're born and raised in Lilliput. I mean, you gotta be tiny to actually enjoy this for a lot of time because there's no place to put anything. And that brings us to our winner, the Suzuki Cappuccino. Look, it may not be the best, most exciting looking vehicle, but it's the only vehicle in history to have this 4-position top that gives you a full hard top, a T-bar T-top roof, a Targa top, and a full roadster. And that alone gives it good points. But then you add in comfortable seats, great handling, great straight line performance, top speed that will go anywhere in the United States with ease, and it's pretty practical. And although, yes, it does need servicing, and it does have a tendency to rust, and it really needs to be stored indoors, well, that's the same as the other two. But it definitely pulls ahead and is the best of the ABC Kei supercars. So there you have it, the ABC Kei supercars ranked. I'm Sam Baer, car guy in chief for Class 1 or Collector vehicles, reminding you that life's too short for ordinary cars. See you next time.